welcome to all of you. Great to have you with us. I am delighted, Sim, to celebrate your new book, the launch of the new book. It's such a wonderful accomplishment.
Thank you.
I thought, well, first of all, introduction. So, yes, I'm visiting from the Strategic Communication Program. I am the Deputy Program Director and a lecturer there. I'm also a PhD scholar in organizational communication. Just became a candidate, in fact, working on my dissertation soon.
Wonderful.
My research focuses on social network analysis. I look at leadership and resilience within organizations. So social networks, that's how people are connected to each other, form of communication. And going way back, 2018, I was a Fulbright U.S. scholar in Bulgaria. I taught for a semester at the American University in Bulgaria. And my work has been published in a number of well-known outlets, including Fast Company, Forbes, and the Stanford Social Innovation Review. That's me. Sim, do you want to self-introduce?
Thanks so much, Jesse, and thanks so much for being here with us today and doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I'm Sim Segal. I'm the founder and director of the Enterprise Risk Management Program here at Columbia University. I'm a full-time faculty senior lecturer in discipline. I'm also president of SimErgy, an ERM consulting firm, a boutique firm. I am author of a couple of books. The first book was on my technical topic, enterprise risk management. The second is the book that we're going to talk about today. Excuse me. I'm a former vice president on the board of directors of the Society of Actuaries. I'm a fellow of the Society of Actuaries, a chartered enterprise risk analyst. I've been frequently invited to speak over 200 presentations globally on risk subjects. I'm a former Risk Radio podcast host, a podcast I created for SimErgy. I did 240 episodes there. I'm a former editor of 2 global publications connected to my profession, one technical and one communications, and that's sort of relevant for our topic today. And I'm also former chair of a Society of Actuaries section that specializes really mostly in the skills that are covered today.
All right, well, why don't we dive into it? So we're going to learn about the new book and what's in it. And first of all, I have to say I've heard you speak many times about the importance of communication. And of course, when you talk to me, you're preaching to the choir. I believe in it too. But my first question for you is, what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because this is important. Like my inspiration for this is I'm a technical professional, and I have worked with a lot of different types of technical professionals, and I've seen and felt that we all have sort of the same disease. We all have a shortage of communication skills. We have a lot of technical skills in our area of mastery, but we lack this. So understanding that success as a technical professional is more than just having the right answer. It is how you say things and your persuasive abilities as well. I have been a recipient of a lot of training in communication, not from academic side, but from the corporate side. So all the organizations that I worked for, a leading organization, I've received a lot of training on it. And what I did was I was sort of seeing what worked, what made sense to me, what worked, reframing things, trying it, practicing it through my technical practice, and then curating this. And what I have now is I want to share, and I've been sharing for a long time with other technical professionals here. Here is a set of curated skills that are really important for you. And I think that technical professionals I specifically selected those that are accessible to reachable by our technical professionals and also will be relevant to what we do. And I passionately believe, and I know you do too, that is the biggest competitive differentiator, will be more of a determinant of the future trajectory of any technical professional's career, much more than technical table stakes, absolutely. It's these skills, and we'll talk a lot about it today, I hope.
Yeah, for sure. I know technical professionals are interested in facts and evidence, but I've also heard someone say the facts don't necessarily speak for themselves. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about why technical professionals sometimes resist opportunities to enhance their communication skills.
Yeah, see, that's really key because, what can technical professionals not do? Right? So why do they not have these? Why have they not gone out and gotten these skills? So there are a number of pieces of resistance. One is that there's only so much time. So there's so much technical stuff we have to push into our heads. All the academic training is like, okay, let's just focus on this and just get it in there because we want to do more. This is all we can do, just push it all in. So we don't make the time for it. There's also a characterization that these skills are soft skills. And I will tell you, when I speak on this topic, what I say is, and forgive me, but what I always say is when you hear, so the soft skills term is an attempt to denigrate, to sort of put down these skills. I say it's soft like this is soft. You have to think about cash when you think about soft, because if you look up in any organization toward the top, what you see is the people that have been most successful, they have their technical skills. They have their technical skills. What is the reason they're up there is because they have these skills really strong. So that's how you should think about soft skills. And I explain this to technical professionals a lot. There's also a persistent myth that, look, we're born with certain skills, we tech people. Some people are just born with communication skills. The marketing people, they got polished, they gift of gab, that's their bag. Salespeople, we have different skills, and it's okay. They have theirs, we have ours. They can't learn ours, we can't learn theirs. And it's a myth. It's actually not true. It's just, again, it's getting over these resistances. If you find the right skills and they're presented in the right way, with the right way to frame them and the right way to approach them psychologically, even emotionally, technical professionals can grab onto this and really learn it. And that's what I put together here in the book.
Yeah, I love what you said about when you look at the higher levels of the organization, you see the communication skills that those leaders have. It reminds me, there's a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea is that, okay, you've mastered your craft, now can you bring other people on board? And I think that's so important. And I totally agree with you about the growth mindset, that we can improve these skills through practice, definitely. So, and I want to let you know, we are going to have some time for questions in a little bit, so if you think of questions, make a note for yourself and we'll come back to them. But I do want to ask, so what generally is covered in this book?
Yeah, okay, the topics that we're outlining them here is, the first is understanding. The sections, understanding has to come first, and that is listening and reading body language. Those are the important parts. The next is presenting. Once you understand, then you're ready to present your concepts. 3 aspects. First, creating the content itself, preparing to present, and then making the presentation itself physically. 3 is sort of higher level, which is persuading. Leadership communication, persuasion principles, and negotiating skills are all the 3 components we talk about. And then other topics in the book are interviewing from both sides, as interviewer and interviewee, and also exhibiting professionalism as a technical professional.
Now, I know
if I could circle back, by the way, to the prior thing, I was thinking about this because, we did a little prep, beforehand. Jesse and I talked, but one of the things I hadn't thought about is this sort of story. You mentioned like what got you there will not get you the next step. You know what popped into my head? I don't know if you've ever seen the show, and I forgot the name of it. It's where there's like a failing restaurant, and this expert who's a former like Iron Chef or something comes in. Have you seen that one? I forgot the name.
Yeah, I have seen that. There's another one called Bar Rescue that's kind of like that.
Yeah, that was, I think, more. This is an older show, maybe. I don't know if you remember. But anyway, the guy is amazing, and what he has is really a balance of skill. He comes in, it's the same story like every time. These restaurants were successful because somebody had a passion for really usually cooking. And they had recipes and they had it. And then they launched this restaurant, and it was successful for a while, and it started failing because these people don't have the other skills. They don't have the management skills, they have the communication skills, they don't have the business skills, and he tries to have a balance of these things. He comes and training them, and to give them kudos, they actually follow up like a lot of reality shows don't. And almost all the restaurants he tried to say fail again, because he has some unique skills, and he only spends a very short time with them and then moves on to the next one. But it applies in all fields, all technical fields.
For sure. So I noticed that you put listening first. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So why is listening first? Well, it is probably the single most undertaught and underappreciated skill in communication. And it's incorrectly seen as passive. And a mentor of mine, early mentor of mine in my career, Judy Weiss, who was the chief actuary of MetLife, she used to say, listening is your most effective weapon. weapon. Now that's a really aggressive type of phrasing. And we're taught like, oh, you don't have to advance your skills. You have to advance your ideas. You have to speak up and, assert, and that's how you advance. Yeah, that's true too. What's also true is that listening is really powerful because you first have to understand the landscape of the room and then craft a communication that's going to navigate that successfully. So that's something that has to be appreciated. There's a famous quote by Solomon ibn Gebirol, 11th century philosopher. I'll read it here. The beginning of wisdom is silence. The second stage is listening. And of course, there's another very famous quote from Stephen Covey, who's author of the bestseller 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Everybody's always trying to talk first, but there's a lot of power in listening. And I want to share a quote from the book, and forgive me, I want to just read it directly because it's a few sentences, because it's so important to me. I say this in different ways a lot, that I believe that the only thing of value between people is the interchange. That's it. Nothing of physical, it's nice, but this is the real value, is interchange. And the only way to get anything done of any value is with and through other people. A lot of technical professionals are, give me my laptop, give me my books, and let me just go to town. It's not going to necessarily cause the world to beat a path to your door, right? So communication is the key connective tissue of relationships, and listening is the key to true communications. So if you think about how valuable it is when you feel somebody really deeply understands you, that's what we don't get a lot of. So if you offer that, you become a very much appreciated person in your organization, on your team. So I wanted to share that. When I also, counted the cash, it's like soft skills, you got to look up for success. Listening is really critical for that. So a couple of examples of it's really highly correlated with success. So case studies, Bill Clinton. So former President Bill Clinton. He was very divisive. There were some people loved him, some people absolutely hated him. What did everybody absolutely agree on? He had a magic that when he was present with somebody, and it could be when there were 55 microphones and cameras around, there were 1 million people around the world watching, and he's talking to somebody, people are yelling, and when he's talking to you, everybody, people that loved him and hated him, said he made you feel like you were the only person on the planet. He was present, and he was really paying attention to just you. He had a deep interest in, now he cultivated that as part of understanding politics and at an early age and working on that. But that was a big key, I think, to his success. Another story I'll share is, I don't know if you ever heard of the New Yorker Festival.
Yeah.
It's New Yorker is like one of the best known publications. I mean, it's respected widely in the United States for the quality. They run an event once a year. The event, funny enough, as technical people, it's not necessarily managed that well, but they curate some really amazing. It's like a weekend they have once a year where they have these 90-minute little things you can go to, and you got to sign up quick because they sell out. But they're intimate, like 200-300 people. They have famous politicians or actors or writers, directors, all sorts. So I wanted to go to this one. I was going for many years. This one event there they had was character actors. Now we all know, people, stars and the fame and but character actors are something really interesting. And I knew a number of the ones that were going to be present. So I was really interested in what they were going to say. And what I noticed was, so it was like 90 minutes. It was like 5 minutes Q&A at the end. There were only 2 questions that had time to be asked. I was fortunate enough that I got to the mic and I got to ask my question. And my question was this. I said, watching you up there, and the people like John Turturro, Luis Guzman, Christine Baranski, these are major people that have been very successful in the field. Actors, if you're a star, your star can rise or fall quickly if you kill a couple movies. If you're a character actor, you can have a long career and pop up like in a million of them, but it's tough. And I said, each of you is so accomplished in your technical field, but I noticed that you could lecture for hours on the subject. This is just like a 90-minute. I said, but I noticed when anybody else on the panel was talking, all of you were intently listening to the other person. As I explained to me the importance of listening, and they all agreed. Luis Guzman and John Turturro both said their mothers made them great listeners, and it was super important to their careers. Christine Baranski, who seemed to be the sort of the more experienced person on the panel, they kind of deferred to her. She said something very dramatic, but as an actor, you would be dramatic, but it was powerful and it stayed with me. She said, we create life by being present with other people. If you think about that, a lot of us what are we doing? We're in our heads. So like, we're worrying about something that happened in the past. We're worried about something's gonna happen in the future. All we have is this moment. Those few people that can master that ability to really be present, they make something special happen. And it's their connections, and the connections lead to relationships, network, and expansion of ideas and success.
I love the way that you're describing listening as almost a visible thing that you do, that you enact the listening while you're listening. And I think we've all encountered people in the workplace who aren't good listeners. And I remember years ago I had a boss. I was just starting out in advertising, actually. And I had a boss who I approached him at an event, a party, and I was talking to him, and he kept like looking away while I was talking to him. I'm like looking for someone better to talk to. I don't know, but I think we've all had experiences like that, and they make you feel really small when you're on the receiving end of that. And the flip side is how big you make the other person feel when you're a good listener and you're paying attention. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the different techniques for listening.
Yes, I'll give some examples, and that's really important because I think we don't, with all the distractions of the phone now, we don't really, and it shouldn't be called a phone anymore, but it's so many things pulling us away, and it's done so widely. We don't think about it as much anymore, and like you said, when it happens to us, maybe we notice it. We have no idea the powerful negative impact it can make. A lot of people think, well, I'm meeting with this person, I'm spending time with them, that's going to advance the relationship. No, you can do a lot of damage if you don't do it properly. Better not to do it unless you can give the full attention. So a couple of examples. Receptive body language you have to have. Eye contact is really important. It expresses interest and respect, and it engenders trust. It builds trust, and trust is the basis, of course, of every relationship. I'll give you an example. This is a case study from my past. There was a friend I had, and she was a salesperson. When she was in her young 20s, she was a salesperson at Xerox. This was, I want to say, 50 years ago. She was in her 20s at Xerox, making over $200,000 at that time. That's really a lot of money. So what was one of her elements to success? She was really interested in people, but when she'd be in a group of like 4 or 5 people, she would get eye contact. She would just like find it and like almost like steal eye contact like it was money, and that's what it turned into for her. I mean, it was amazing watching her work. She would connect with people within like you just leave. Let's say you go get a Coke and come back. She knew, all their friends and family names. She knew what their kids were majoring in college. She knew she would find out everything and build a relationship, and it starts from that eye contact connection. Other things that you do with your body, and we can't do it in this format because we have to be sort of interviewer structure here, and audiences there, we're engaged with each other and turn a little bit out so that we can see them and present somebody. And if we were personally meeting, and let's say this was my office, I could control the furniture, this would be gone. This would be removed. These chairs would be facing each other so that I'd be facing you straight ahead. So when you speak to somebody, you should be facing them straight ahead and giving them your full attention physically. Like you said, don't be looking somewhere like, the opposite is if I'm turned this way, this makes sense, but if I turn this way, and unfortunately, again, that's the format here, if we're just two and I start turning like this, it's like called the cold shoulder. Like doesn't feel good. Also, your arms and legs should be uncrossed. Now, it's hard for me growing up, my natural body posture, I had the worst body posture. I was like leaning back, arms, legs, it's just uncomfortable. It's like you're sending the wrong signals because it's just comfortable to me. What does it send? It sends closed off the ideas, consciously or unconsciously to the recipient. That's actually happening. They're thinking you're closed off like an umpire. It's like, no, I'm not changing the call. You also want to be up a little bit, sitting up, and these seats are very difficult to do, and leaning a little bit forward, because it's almost like they have them on the edge of their seats. You want to show interest like that. And being at eye level is really important. You'll notice that when a father or mother want to get the attention of their 5-year-old who's got a lot of distraction, they'll actually crouch down at eye level and say, all right, we're going to bed now. You're going to go to bed, get changed, you're going to bed, and say it 6 or 7 times, but they'll be at eye level. Like that's really a key to communication too. just some case studies on these physical skills that you can use. And they're in the book. We tell you how to do it. For in-person meetings, so all the in-person meetings I have, I actually use this. Now, you can't always do it when there's fixed chairs or really heavy chairs, but when we're in committee meetings and it's around a big table, it's not that convenient, and you've got to be a little subtle about this. You don't want to be too obtrusive. But I will turn my chair a little bit if there's a person who's going to be presenting for the next 10 minutes, I'll turn my chair subtly, I'll swivel my body a little bit so I can be facing them and leaning a little bit forward, making eye contact. It actually works. If you try it, you will find more connection with that person. It also creates a better performance out of the givers as well. That's another aspect. It's interesting, and you actually, I'm going to go back to another case I want to give, but you actually trained our students to do this because you graciously came on to one of my classes, and we're talking to the students about the importance of video connections. And I've done this ever since you talked about it, and I put it in the book, so thank you. It's really hard because when you're on a video platform, some of them, like Zoom, will let you move the faces around where someone's talking. You can put them in a place where you can mostly be looking in a way that looks like you're looking right at them. But with Teams, it's not so easy. So you have to think about it. It's like, how do you seem to come off? We've all been in meetings where a person has two screens. And let's say you're there, and they can see you, but they're like this. They're looking off over there. And it is distracting. It's a lot. They're not present with you, but it just feels like a lack of connection. So giving the appearance is what you trained us to do, is to look about an inch or so below the video camera, and it's so hard. So when I have prospect or client meetings, often they're using Teams, and I got two faces here. I can't move them. I'm like looking right there, and I'm peripherally trying to read the body language while making sure I'm delivering the eye contact. That's how important it is. In terms of these skills, like, how can this be important? It works. It really works. And like you said, when you don't use it, it works negatively, and you may not realize it. You can damage a relationship. When I first learned these physical listening skills, when you first learn something, it's a little bit awkward because you're too focused on the skills. It's almost like, I don't know if any of you watched baseball, but, say a batter all of a sudden is not hitting. So all of a sudden, the pitching coach will work with them and say, okay, your chin, you got to tuck it a quarter of an inch in more. You're opening up your hip like an 18th of a second early. And they're focusing on all these things, which normally it was just smooth and natural. Now all of a sudden, they're distracted by these adjustments, and their pattern gets worse for a little while until they can get their body in a groove, and then it becomes automatic, and then they become better. It's the same thing here. But so you'd think I would be very clumsy about it the first time I tried to apply it. So I'm going to tell you a story about the first time I tried to apply it. I remember I was visiting my parents back home in Detroit, and my family lives around the kitchen table. We never leave. We eat day and night. It's like it's just meal ends, snacks, and we roll right into the next meal. And it's like a very home environment. And it's a huge kitchen table. So removing barriers is one of the things that we talk about. You can't do it there, right? But I remember there was family members around the table, and there was somebody I had never met before who was obviously a friend of the family, and they were visiting, and they were telling a story. And I was just learning these skills, so I looked at everybody's body language. Nobody was listening. Physically they were not showing any listening, but they were not listening. One person was asleep, another was looking at the phone, another one was doing something. It was all over the place. It was very rude and disrespectful to the person, so the story was not that good. So I said, I'm going to try. So I was diagonal across, and I sat up, I turned my chair, I turned my body, I sat up, leaned a little forward, made eye contact, nodded a little bit like we tell you. And of course, when you're trying to present to a bunch of people and you can't have any eye contact, no body, it's really difficult. But as long as there's one person that's engaging you, all of a sudden you can connect. So you feel like you're giving more. This person noticed it. They will always notice it. What was really interesting was they started to tell a better story. And it was almost like one of those sitcoms where all the faces sort of turn into the camera like in a ridiculous way. I noticed, I didn't change. I was like noticing, I did not want to move my body. I was just saying, I noticed one person started to perk up and another person started to perk up and another person, and I knew that it was this technique that led to that. It led to the connection, the better story, and the engagement. Everybody around the person was sleeping woke up. And everybody was engaged in the story, went on for another 20 minutes, and it was fantastic. You cannot convince me that this was not because I initiated those skills. And that was when I was the least practiced at it. So my point is anybody can do this.
Yeah, well, that's such a great story. I think about there's been research on the fact that if a good listener can actually help the other person clarify their ideas. Like if you're listening well, they tell a better story. They are able to clarify what they're talking about. And I also like what you were saying about being conscious of what your body is doing. I remember hearing someone once say that you should be conscious of self, not self-conscious. So you're telling the baseball batter story, and that person's getting self-conscious, and that kind of messes with them a little bit. So you don't want to be so focused on it that you're self-conscious, but having an awareness of what your body is doing when you're talking to other people. It's so important. So I'm hoping we could turn to body language, because I know you have a chapter on this in the book.
Yeah, but there's one more concept, if I could share, is the yes and technique.
Oh, yes.
When you're listening, so we already covered the more important stuff, which is the physical and then the eye contact. Of course, you have to do some responding. Mostly you should be listening, but when you respond, there's a technique from improv or improvisation or comedy, is to use the yes and technique. And I've seen a lot of technical professionals don't know this, they don't use it, they violate this. So somebody presents an idea, you want to build on it in a positive way. It leads to a good response in the person you're speaking to. So if you say, I'll just give an example of how this is used in improv. Let's say, improv comedy is basically, let's say 3 people or 4 people standing on stage, and they'll say to the audience, "Oh, give us a job that I'm supposed to have in a situation," and that. So people throw out from the audience, and dynamically they just adapt to it and have to tell a story in succession. They build on each other's story, dynamically, spontaneously, ad-libbing everything, and like they'll say, "Oh, we're waiting at a bus stop and we're all working at a big office." And so one person will say, "Okay, we're waiting, the bus is late." The next person will build on it and say, "Yeah, and it starts to rain." Now, if the next person says, "No, it's not raining," it kills the scene. It's a rule. You can't say no in improv. I mean, there's an analogy to work, and that is you want to build on it. If somebody says an idea and you say, "Well, that's not true," what happens? Defense. Right away, the arms come across. We'll talk about body language next. And their feathers get ruffled. There's a more polite, respectful way to say it. You could say, "Okay, that's true." And what's also true is when you apply that technique to the situation, it's a little bit more nuanced. There could be other ways of doing it. So you're joining together, and people are more open to listening. So that's another aspect of responding, is to use the yes and. It may not fit grammatically. Like really the word but might fit more perfectly grammatically. I tell people to violate the grammar and use yes and, because both things can be true if you say it right. Not always, but most of the time.
I'm glad you brought up improv. I've actually done some improv
the hardest
training.
thing in the world.
It's been a while, but I took classes for a few years, specifically to help my public speaking, because I'd been in Toastmasters, the public speaking group, for a number of years, and I reached a point of competence in my public speaking, but there was no joy in it. And so I was like, how can I bring some more joy to what I'm doing? How can I release some of my inhibitions? And I think that improv training is such a great thing. I know it's not for everyone, but highly recommended.
I actually found a guy years ago. I brought this guy into he was a recruiter in my field, and he was in the Chicago Annoyance Theater, which is a famous improv group, and he would come to our class. Way back when I was teaching this in the business school also, he would come to the classes and do a little exercise in improv to teach the SN concept. So it's very hard what you did, but it does translate. It does translate to a lot of other things.
For sure, for sure. Well, now let's turn to body language.
I should say, and it does translate. But it does translate, and it does translate. Use the S and. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and let's talk about body language.
Yes. Oh, body language. Okay, so this is another aspect where it's so important. It's I'll just read this quote first before I talk about what I want to say. This is Christopher Voss, former FBI hostage negotiator, says, "Body language and tone of voice, not words, are our most powerful assessment tools." That says a lot. The way I like to say it is, if you're on a video call with me, and all of a sudden you can tell I've just got a weak video connection, you're only hearing like every third word, you will stop it and say, "We can't hear you, you got a bad connection, let's just either fix it or drop out, come back, or we'll do it another time. Because you know you're not going to get the full story. We technical professionals don't understand. There's an entire other language. Words are only half the story. If we're not reading body language, it's like being in a video meeting and getting only half the words. You're going to make a lot of mistakes in interpretation of what's actually going on. It's the words plus what the signals are. So that's really important. And I've seen so many technical professionals just drive a truck right through body language. You can see in the room, they're presenting, they're kind of rushing through the presentation, and you can see there's somebody in the room, all of a sudden they just lean back, turned away, pursed their lips, and crossed their arms, and they're gone. You've lost them. And they're still trying to rush through the point. You might as well stop. You got to go back, unwind it, ask questions, find out what actually did you trip on, and address that before you can, and then move forward, because you're wasting your time otherwise. And that's just an example of some of the signals that are ignored. So it's very, very important.
Yeah, so what are your best body language tips?
So here's a few that I wanted to share, which is one of the key concepts is from this, I think this FBI negotiator, I think he was, CIA or FBI, that wrote the book, What Everybody Knows. He said that people make a lot of mistakes in thinking they can read body language. Oh, I see something and this means that. You don't know. What is true is that if you know the person's baseline body language and there's a change from that, that's a signal. So if I'm always going like this, you don't know me, you think, oh, something's anxiety there. And it's like, no, it's just, that's my baseline. So you got to know that. And it's kind of interesting because it relates almost to the core principle in what I do for a living, the value-based enterprise risk management, which is the core of our master's degree here, which is the concept that risk should be defined, and we define it as anything that causes a change in what you expected in your baseline strategic plan, long-term projection results. It's not just super losses, it's more upside, more downside, anything near and around baseline, it's all deviations. So it's a similar kind of concept. So you have to know what the person's baseline is, and deviations are a signal. Signals to watch for, so 4 really easy ones to watch for that are really common in meetings that I think technical professionals miss is crossed arms. When somebody moves from not crossed arms to crossed arms, something may have happened. Yeah, you got to read that as they don't like what you just said, so you got to find out what was it. Pursing lips, like that, it's visible, it's right in the face. So even in video meetings, you're going to see if people push their lips out like that, they don't want it. They don't like it. Something's off. And people don't know about that. Another one is shifting hips, which could also be seen in person or on video because it moves the whole body. And once you notice these body language tips, you'll see them in a lot of, well-done movies. Hollywood makes, they research them and they put in actors that are good, put in the body language that mirrors the emotions they're supposed to be feeling. So you can spot it in movies too. And you'll see a lack of comfort. You'll see this in a movie typically where there's somebody that's guilty in the room and somebody's getting closer to the truth and they'll shift like this. They'll shift like this. They'll shift side to side with their hips. And the upper body's moving when you do that. It's like that shift, and your seat's not uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable. Something just happened. You got to pay attention to that. And as you said, this is like turning your head or turning your torso even more so. Turning away, it expresses I'm all of a sudden more interested over here. Now maybe just be I got to go. I got another meeting. But I've seen that happen in hallways too. Technical professionals are bending the ear of an executive. The executive's got to go, or they lost interest. They're doing this, and they're like still trying to steal every second. And it's like you're burning the relationship. You're not respecting that this person's time is important. They want to go, and you've lost their interest. You got to let it go. Yeah.
Well, let's turn specifically to presentation skills. This is an important topic in your book, and I know you break it down into 3 areas. You have the creating the content, you have preparing to present, and then actually making the presentation. Could you take us through that?
Sure. So some examples in terms of creating content, tailoring to your audience. So we technical professionals spend so much time in our own environment. There's so much, again, to know and to converse with our colleagues that we tend sometimes to get really insular. Understanding the audience is really key. You got to meet them where they are in terms of their understanding. So just as an example, in my field, as a technical professional, as a technical enterprise risk management professional, when part of what I do, there's modeling, there's a lot of talking to people. There's a lot of interviews, first with all the senior executives, about 2 to 3 dozen meetings, confidential one-on-one meetings with 90-minute meetings with all the top people, CEOs, CFOs, the whole C-suite, all the heads of the businesses, their lieutenants, the head of HR, head of IT, head of all these people. There's a second set of interviews when we're doing a deeper dive on specific risks that have been identified, which is another, 2 to 3 dozen as well, with other subject matter experts or sometimes high-level professionals as well. In preparation for these meetings, I always meet with the chief risk officer in advance, and I say, I want to understand who I'm meeting with, and tell me about everything you know about them, almost like a psychological profile. or a bio at least, right? I want to know what's the style of communication that they have. Are they fast talk, slow talk? Do they what did they get their degree in? What is their role right now? Where are they going to? Are they friend or foe to the current enterprise risk management in the company, and why? So we get all of that so I can understand, again, the landscape and navigate the communication, customize it to where they are. So we can speak their language as part of that. We have to speak in their terms. So I know that there may be certain terms that they use and how they look at the business, the more we can talk in the terms of the others. In fact, I wrote an article about this because sort of not functioning as purely an actuary anymore. That's my training. But it's risk. That's sort of at the core of it. But years ago, so I was branching out into enterprise risk management, and they were looking at this saying, hey, this is one of these sort of non-traditional fields for actuaries at the time, a long time ago. They said, would you speak on it and write an article? So I did that. And one of the things I put in there is you've got to understand the other professions that you're dealing with, the other organizations you're working with, and meet them there. You also need to relate it to their experience. So you have to find a way of understanding how is this going to affect them specifically, and show the benefits and the risks of not doing it from their perspective. It's a mind shift that we technical professionals don't think about first, but that's really important. So tailoring to audience is important. Even more important than that, I would say, is managing level of detail. And all technical professionals, we know, we've heard this so much, it's not a surprise. Too much detail. We need to downshift the detail. It's so hard for us to let go of that detail. So it's something to really focus on. So I try to inspire with a couple of quotes first on this. One, there's 4 questions I give to ask a technical professional should ask themselves to check this and to manage the level of detail. One is it necessary? We have an idea, we have to show our work. We're so enamored with the intricacies. Is it really necessary? Do people need it? So the quote is, and I think technical professionals should respect Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci said that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. That says a lot, the way to think about it. I'll give you a case study. This was early in my career, very early. I was maybe a few years out of school, and I was working at MetLife, which is, we later became the #1 insurance company in the country. And I remember I was invited to a breakfast by one of the senior executives. And what he did, this guy, Phil Briggs, was one of the most, I think he was the most senior actuary in the company at the time. He ran 4 different departments. And he had monthly breakfasts with a dozen people randomly selected at all levels and all functions. He just wanted to keep his finger on the pulse of the people, find out what the concerns are. So he would just take questions. And I still remember exactly even where I was sitting in the room. He was sitting there at the head of this long conference table, and there was somebody sitting next to me. It was an administrative assistant. I was sitting here. And the administrative assistant asked a question. And they asked, I heard our pension plan is overfunded. Are we going to get cash out of it? We're going to get money out of it. And without going into many details, these defined benefit pension plans are not around anymore. We just have 401ks now mostly. But these were, you build up money and eventually it's there for you to retire, and then the company makes you certain payments throughout your retirement. So I was studying this. It's really complex instrument, right? And I had index cards I was memorizing because, going through actuarial exams at the time. I had an index card on that question. He started talking about, there's many things that can temporarily cause it to be over or underfunded, but you don't get payouts like that. That's not going to happen. But I was trying to remember my mnemonic for the index card of all the things that were the major factors as he was effortlessly obviously years out of the exam, checking off, bing, 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 going through all the major things, and he explained it in a way that when I turned to the administrator, they were nodding. I could see they understood, and I thought to myself, that's why he's sitting at the top. That ability to take super complex things and make them simple that anybody can understand, that is a saleable skill, and not easy. But it's a question we have to ask ourselves to get more simply, describe our ideas simply. A second aspect is it appreciated? Is all that volume and depth appreciated in the conversation? So is it necessary? Not yet. Is it even appreciated? Often we think, oh, it is because we love it. It's our profession. And in reality is people looking at us maybe thinking, okay, you don't know how to prioritize important from not important. You're not respectful of our time. You should really aim, and a lot of technical professionals do this. Ooh, I've got some time with the senior executives. I'm going to use every minute of that time. Don't. Use less. Show you respect. Time is the most precious commodity. Nobody ever complained that a meeting ended early. Have you ever heard that? You've never heard it, right? So when I finish meetings with clients, when I'm doing interviews with senior executives, and we finish in, let's say we finish 20 minutes early of the 90-minute meeting, I say, okay, so you've got everything we wanted. Thank you very much. And I said, we're finishing early. We're putting 20 minutes back in your day. I said, in our parlance, we call that an upside risk scenario. I guess a little chuckle, but people love it. It's like unexpected extra time in your day, please. I mean, that's going to be always a welcome thing. So it's sort of looking at it differently. The third question is it understandable? We technical professionals are in such our own lane for so long, we sort of forget how many layers of this there are and how much can you present at one time that people can absorb in one sitting when they're first hearing these concepts. We got to sort of take it easy and dial it down a little bit. The last one I'll say, a fourth question, is really important. I've seen a lot of technical professionals do this too, which is you use too much time. People don't realize that you go over time, forget about it. You have to think about it. How much time do you have? You should have a general sense with practice how long, or say, presentations take, or you present a concept, and you should draw an actual pyramid of your points, a visual map. And if you build out the points and the supporting points and all that into a pyramid, you can cut it up and say, okay, this is a 2-hour discussion. This is 60 minutes. This is a 20-minute speech, and this is the elevator speech. And you should know what those are. And especially because when you're presenting, you have to be prepared, especially typically if you're on panels and you have a 3-person panel and you each are supposed to have 20 minutes, you should be prepared that there was a late start, there was a problem, somebody ran over, and maybe you don't have 20 minutes. You should be prepared for 15 or even 12 or even 10. And you should know what that is. Talking faster is not the answer. And we've all seen that so many times, people rushing through. Nobody's absorbing anything. Oh, well, I got through everything. No, you communicated nothing, right? So we have to know, okay, if this is the case, I'm going to go one level up and I'm going to skip over this slide, that slide. You should know in advance so that you can be professional and still deliver the major elements. Those are the 4 questions I think are really important to ask about creating the content.
Yeah, that's so great. I mean, this is kind of the heart of what we teach in the strategic communication program. It's like, know your audience, find out who they are, and then deliver the right amount of information to them so that you can avoid information overload, because they can't absorb all those details and they don't need all those details. You'll actually look smarter if you put less detail. But be ready with the details if asked. So, yeah. So I think, in a minute, we're going to open it up for questions. So think about if you have a question for Sim, we'll take some questions. Before we do that, I have one more question of my own.
We got a lot more to cover too, though. But
okay,
yeah.
Sure. So can you give us some tips on how to present? How to prepare to present?
Yeah, so this is not really like a presentation chart. We're talking about the formal presentations where you've got the slide, you're standing up in front of an audience and presenting. So one of the things that I talk about is to arrive early, which I did today. And one of the things I say is write the room. When I come into a conference, those conference rooms. So let's say you're presenting at 10:30, there was an 8:30, and you come into the room and people are gone, they're getting their coffee and whatever, and they're going to be coming back soon. I clean it up. People say, well, it's not your job. It's my job, right? The table should be straight, the chairs should be straight, the name tags should be straight, garbage should be sort of kicked underneath. It should all look clean and professional, because right or unright, fair or unfair, people absorb the visuals and they attach that to your lack of professionalism or your professionalism. Fair or unfair, that's what actually happens psychologically, consciously or unconsciously. So you've got to organize it. That's one thing. The other thing is check the tech. And it's something that I did. I always recommend, who's the most important person when you're presenting? You? It's not you. It's the technical people. If people cannot hear, so much has to go right so you can hear us and see us with the light. You can't imagine. It's complicated. And getting it right, if it's wrong, if my mic doesn't work, you're going to say, Sim doesn't know how to present. That's just how it works. So the most important person are the tech people. So you should go respect them and talk to them as I did with every one of them. So the people that are important in the room today are Jared, and I'm terrible with names, so I have to write it down. Jared, Felicia, Thomas, Lydia, and Peter. They're making this happen, and thank you, by the way. It's all working incredibly well because we're very professional here at Columbia. So that's a part of it. So what you'll notice also is most tech people that support conferences, there's a lot of pressure. They're often stretched thin. They may be supporting 30 rooms simultaneously, right? So if you need something, it's humanistic to connect people and thank them. It's respectful. It's also good business because if you need a lavalier and you don't have it, then you have to get it, right? Otherwise you look bad. So that's really important. Also walk the walk. Know where you're going to stand when you're approaching, where you're going to be standing when you present, where you're going to be standing during the Q&A, everything, and where you can't stand. I always look at the sight lines. You don't want to have a sort of a puppet show of shadows. So you have to know where the lighting is when you are walking, and we advise not to walk too much, but you shouldn't be standing between the light source and your screen. And in some setups in rooms, if you're standing in front of the speaker with a lavalier, you're going to get feedback on the audio feedback. So we talk a lot about that in the book, and also how to even assemble a lav on your body so you look professional. Sort of not to have a name tag, sort of, because that always can go awry. And different things like that, you have to prepare in advance. It makes such a difference because it is so distracting if something goes wrong. So just prep. A lot of people forget the prep. There's a lot to that. Of course, you got to check yourself, but this is just some of the comments I wanted to talk about that. The other aspect of presenting is, and you've seen so many things about how to actually physically present, and we can talk about that too, is most people, are, with practice comes comfort and enjoyment of it. In the beginning especially, most speakers are uncomfortable. They're nervous, right? So there's a couple of things. There's a Seinfeld quote, which I'm not going to get exactly right. It's in the book, but something like, the number one fear people have is public speaking. The number two fear is death. He says death is number two. Seinfeld says, that means it's so crazy and it's so high, right, that if you're at a funeral, almost thinks that you're better in the casket than making the eulogy. It's sort of the way of thinking about it. Why is it so nerve-wracking? But it is. So what you can do to relax, there's a couple of techniques that we talk about in the book. One of them is controlled breathing. I don't want to call it yoga breathing because different people call it different things, but some people call it yoga breathing. And I'll tell you a story of how I found this controlled breathing. A friend of mine who worked at Debevoise in Plimpton had Midtown. They had an event after work for people just to come. They could bring their colleagues or friends. And it was this controlled breathing. I didn't know what it was. And it was, you sit in a circle, there was like 10 of us, and you take off your shoes, they dim the lights, and this guru is guiding this thing. It's just like watching your breathing. And he had like sort of music, but it was almost like just an even gong, like gong, gong, just soft, just so you could time your breathing. And he said you take like a breath in and hold it, and then you sort of take maybe 5 counts out with your breath, hold it for a beat, and then maybe 3 or 4 breaths in, whatever's comfortable with you, and then do it again. It's sort of like a box. And you do those 4 elements over and over again. It forces you to relax. You almost can't control it. If you do that, it will force your heart rate. So I went a couple times, and we're supposed to have our eyes closed. Obviously, he didn't, because all of a sudden I jumped. And he stopped the thing. He goes, what happened? What happened? And I said, I think my heart stopped for a second. He goes, good. He said, yogis can start their heart for 81 seconds. I said, good, that's not good. And I never went back because I don't want to take any chances. So, but it was just something that really, really works, and it can work for anybody. It's just, you can just look it up. It's controlled breathing. Another technique is sort of focal point. And the analogy is, we've all seen tennis, right? So you've all seen when the tennis players are playing and all of a sudden one person is not playing that well and they sort of go to the side and they're making adjustments to their racket. You know, they've got their thumb on the strings and they're looking at it and they're adjusting it. And then they come back to play the next point. They're not adjusting their strings. Those strings are way too high tension to move. They're using a technique, they're making it look like that, but they're using a technique was when you're nervous, your eyes are flying all around. And the two are connected. So if you can actually focal point your eyes, if you just pick a spot and force yourself to stare at that one spot, so that's what that tennis player is doing. I got to calm down is what they're thinking. And they look at their thumb and at one spot in the tennis racket, they're breathing, but they watch it, it slows the heart rate. So it's just a couple of techniques for especially newer speakers, just to chill a little bit and to relax. So I think that's sort of...
Yeah, I like a different kind of consciousness of self, you know, like paying attention to how you're feeling, like the embodied emotions that you're feeling in the moment and kind of managing your breath and your anxiety and whatever else is coming up for you. I think that's so important. Do you want to take some questions now, or should we wait till the end?
Well, we have more questions to share.
Yeah, for sure.
There's more I wanted to share about the presentation itself.
Yeah.
Because you asked about the three aspects of the presentation, so I'm going to share examples.
Yeah,
of all
definitely.
Yeah. So one is body language. And this is first about the position, no barriers. Just like we talked about here, when you're presenting, there's absolutely no barriers. You cannot use a podium. Hiding behind a podium is hiding. And you should be open body language to connect with people. So I never use a podium. There's actually one example where they were trying to force me to use a podium because that was the structure. It was all videotaped, they had positions, and it was at the big annual meeting, this is my profession, where they were handing over the gavel, and I was doing one of the speeches at that time, and they was like, you have to use this. I convinced them to let me just lab up and walk around, and that really worked much better. So no hiding, and no, even if you can avoid using a handheld, always use a lab because this blocks your face, and it also interferes with your hands. Another aspect is posture. Your feet should be shoulder width apart, which gives you stability, and you should stay still. Now, that doesn't mean you can never move, but it means when you actually stop, and I recommend people pretty much stand still where they're standing, you should really just stand, and deliver in that one spot. It seems much more credible. If you're moving around, swaying is anxiety coming out through your body. It's perceived that way, even if it's just how you move. So staying still and keeping that. Hands are key. A lot of people will put their hand in their pocket, put their hand behind their back, they'll touch their hands together, they'll touch their face, they'll touch their hair if you have hair. It's like all over the place. That's generally classified as a pacifying gesture, right? So it's soothing. Literally like a baby will be soothed by a pacifier. We're soothed by doing this. Like, it's okay, it'll be all right? So that's kind of how it's seen by the audience, is that you're nervous if you're touching any part of your body. If you watch people in political debates, the person that even with their training, the anxiety is so high, you'll see some of them are doing this, they're doing positions where they shouldn't be touching their own hands or their parts of their body, but they are. One famous story, because I read a lot of stuff about American history. George Washington was super brave, okay? He was the richest man in America when he went to fight with the British and rebel and took on the most powerful military on the planet and beat them. And he even his bravery even said there's something magical about the sound of bullets whizzing by in the air. Like he is very brave. And he also was, he was first president, set a great precedent, good judgment, all that great stuff. Wasn't comfortable with public speaking. When he made his first inaugural address after his first election as president, he was standing behind a table, he was reading from paper, he was mumbling, and most importantly and famously, he put his hand in his pocket. People, including me, are talking about it today. It's like, this thing still haunts them. I mean, it's still, not a huge deal, but it's still talked about. These things are noticed, so it's really important that you have your hands in the right positions and knowing how to do that. So we go through that in the book. Another aspect is connecting to attendees, and this is something, so why are people so afraid of speaking in front of an audience? And I think Part of the reason is if you get up in front of a room and you see 1,000 people, your eyes glaze over and it becomes this amorphous sort of monster kind of attack. It's like, it seems scary. Why? Because that's not a natural thing to do. But what's supernatural is I'm talking to you, or I'm looking at you, I'm talking to you, or I'm talking to you. If you look at one person at a time in the audience and make eye contact, which I should be looking over here, I'm just giving an example now. If you make eye contact with an individual person, there's a connection there. That feels normal and natural. It's not natural to connect to a general mass, but when you're looking at eyes and making eye contact with a human being, that's comfortable and it's natural, and you should just move it around the room a little bit and cover all sides, front, back, side, and then the audience will be connected to you as well, and that will be really comfortable. You also need to have engagement with people. So there's 5 tips I give on this. One is shun the screen. Technical people, we fall in love with the screen. We often have charts and graphs, and it's so comfortable. So we look at that, and it's like we love it, and we just start talking to it. And I always say you never should say a single word unless you're actually looking in somebody's eyes. You should not be talking to the screen. You can look at it, but you should trust yourself that you can look at it, and we call it the arc of silence, right? Look at it, remember it, take your point, and then give it away to somebody. So you should be careful of that. If you talk too much, if you have too much that you're doing with the screen, people say, well, I don't need to be here. And that's kind of what goes on. Another one is to vary your voice. A lot of people think, I need to give this speech and I need to make every word perfect. No, that's exactly the wrong approach. If you memorize it, it's just recitation. You're in your head like a recording, and people get that you're not sort of explaining it for the first time, just talking naturally to somebody. There's not that connection, and they're like, do I need to be here for this? Like, you're just reciting it in your own head. It's not really connecting. So, and some people just have a monotonic voice, so you can work with that, like varying the pitch or the tone or the volume. You can go louder, you can go even softer. Softer sometimes gets more attention. Third is entertain the crowd. So you have to entertain. You have to be interesting. So if you like telling stories, tell stories. If you're funny, use humor, but you've only got to use it against yourself. It's very, and it can also fall flat. So it's a high wire act. If you're charming, be charming. Find your own pathway to engaging, but entertain the crowd. The fourth tip is pop the questions. And this is important. Whether you ask a question of the audience and actually wait for the answer, or even if you ask a rhetorical question, say, well, what was the point of this graph? Well, it was showing you the 3-year pattern, blah, 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 right? So when people hear a question, even rhetorically, the brain says, wait, and there's an answer here coming. I got to pay attention. And this is really interesting because it's a Hollywood device. Hollywood uses this to engage people. You'll notice now when you look at movies, well-done movies, they research all these things. They want to add energy or tension to a scene. So if there's an intense conversation between a couple, let's say, they'll open the refrigerator in the kitchen, and then they'll be talking without closing the door. You may not realize it, but your brain is seeing there's an uncompleted act here. Close the door, close the door, close the door, and it adds energy to the scene. So how is this like that? Well, when you ask a question, I'll say, well, does anybody know the answer to this question? So I throw out to the audience. Everybody's going to be curious. Well, what are the audience members going to say? Because you know an answer is coming, but you haven't received it yet. So you're waiting with bated breath. You want to see and you want to know, well, then what was the real answer? That's why every show now is a competition show. We don't even care who's thrown off next or this week. We just know somebody's going to get there, and we have to know who it is. It's like there's a top 10 list, there's a ranking. What is it? We know the format is coming, but we don't have it yet. Same thing with the question. It leads to engagement and wakes people up a little bit. And fifth is to emphasize your key points. People can't pay attention through, say, a half an hour speech, right? They're in their head. They think many times faster than even I can speak. Right? I'm a fast talker. But so you want to make sure that there's a few main points you may want to emphasize it. Either you might say, if your point is, let's say, listen very closely. So it's almost it's like periods at the end of it. It's like staccato. You can break it up that way. Or you can say, and this is the most important thing you should know is to do this. And then silence. The silence underlines. It's a change in the pattern. People are like, something just happened. Give the weight of the moment. It's almost like an actor not stepping on the other actor's lines by coming in too quick if there's applause or laughter or something. And you can also repeat it. If you say blah, 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 and I do this when I do the info sessions, when I advertise our program here at Columbia, there's a few really important points I want to make. So when I say something, I stop and I say, now I'm going to say that again, because that's probably the most important thing we're going to say today. And then, because people can't pay attention with the same level of energy all the time, they're like, okay, I got to pay attention to this I got to get. They'll hear you. So you have to realize that and ask those questions and reemphasize those points.
I love that you've mentioned actors a number of times during this talk, and I always think about the fact that actors work hard to look spontaneous, and I think that that's what we have to do as speakers and presenters as well. Like, we have to be very conscientious about what we're doing and the setup of the room and how we're interacting with people, our body language, our tone of voice, and that attention to those details helps us seem alive, seem spontaneous, be interesting in the moment. So I think that's
It's really true what you're saying, because many actors will say, I don't want to over-rehearse, because then it becomes rote and they're not really connecting with the camera, which is people, right? In fact, this is a really long time ago, but nobody knows here who Jackie Gleason was. He was a very famous actor like 100 years ago. He famously never rehearsed. He also messed up a lot of the scenes in line, but he was very spontaneous. He's very successful. But you're right, that staged spontaneity, especially if you say something. I mean, there's certain speeches I've given many, many times, and it's hard to make it. But if you focus on the person you're talking to, again, knowing where they are, understanding they're hearing it for the first time, the excitement and passion you have, and communicating that, I think it really translates.
Yeah, and if you don't know who Jackie Gleason is, there's a statue of him outside of Port Authority bus terminal.
Oh, is that right? He was a bus driver in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah,
something like that.
Let's talk about persuasion. You cover persuasion in the book.
Yep.
I know you have broken down in 3 different topics: leadership, communication, persuasion principles, and negotiation skills.
Yeah, so there's three aspects to it. So one is leadership communication. This topic, I sort of just want to set it up and introduce it, but I don't want to get into it here because it's too involved. But there's a technique that is a structure that when you're a leader, sometimes you're managing, sometimes you're leading. And when you're leading, you speak differently. And this technique, I'll just share with you how I learned it. So when MetLife went public, MetLife was a private insurance company owned by shareholders. It went public. And there was a dozen or so teams. I led one of those teams, like a 150-person team. After that, in going through that process, the CEO we had was Bob Benmosche, who came from Wall Street. He's passed on now. He took us 600 officers in small groups and gave us an entire week training in anticipation of going public. I got, for some reason, it was just random, I think I got in one of the first groups, and we went to the IBM training facility upstate New York for an entire week, Sunday, all day, day in, day out. The last half a day was with the CEO. It was all intensive, like a lot of immersive, exercises. To do the training, he got a consultant to come out of retirement to do this, and that consultant was famous for their work with Jack Welch back in the GE days, so one of the most famous people in business history in the United States. And that was what Dr. Carol Weber, she became famous for her work there. And what she trained us in was leadership, and the diamond in the crown of that was this 3-part leadership communication technique that I reframed a little bit and call LC3. And it's so powerful that when I advertise the program, I say to them, it's in the communications course we teach. I personally believe that this one technique is going to be worth more than what you pay for the entire master's degree. You get a lot of great stuff in the master's degree. I think this is so powerful because you can use it in every interaction you have with humans, right? Or even possibly AI simulation of humans coming soon. But you can use it because it's personal life or business in any way. It's a respectful and ethical way to get people to hear to show you've heard them and then to pivot to your side. So I'll just leave it there as the intro, but it's a really cool technique. So that's leadership. The persuasion principles are mostly based on the Cialdini principles. I've added a couple of my own, but I've sort of restructured them. And that's something I've done with this book, is I've curated them, sort of reframed them from the way a technical person would want it. I'll just give a couple of examples of these techniques. There's which really relate for technical professionals. One is the authority principle, Cialdini's principle, which is that people defer to experts, which you hear a lot. Like if you listen to broadcasts and what do they constantly tell you? And this Columbia professor and this author, they love that because your credibility. Columbia has given their stamp of approval. You've gone through a lot to be here. So they need people to trust the news they're reporting. So if it's said by you or it's a published author and there's a publisher that's validated, so it's an authority and people will believe that and they should. So they attach to that. So technical professionals tend to resist this a little bit because they're like, it sounds like bragging. We don't want to talk too much about our expertise, and people know it anyway. So they tend to be a little bit more shy about it. And I think instead of resisting it, what I suggest to technical professionals is to do a few things. One is to reframe how you think about it. Instead of thinking about, oh, I'm bragging about myself, it's not. You're advocating for your profession. Your profession is valid and useful, and if you get people to appreciate it in the correct way, what your ideas will have the correct weight in the discussion, and good outcomes will ensue. The second thing is to share often. Often people will make the mistake that, well, everybody knows that I have these skills or credentials. It's like, well, maybe they forgot, or maybe not in the context of what you're doing. So a friend of mine had an MBA, and was working at this company, and they were in competition for this job with other people. It was a new role that opened up, and it was a small company at the time. And the CEO finally came into my friend's office and said, "You got it. You beat everybody else out in the competition." And my friend was telling me the story. It said that they told the CEO, "Oh, great! Now I can put my MBA to use." And you know what the CEO said? "You have an MBA?" This is their employee. It's a small company. These are busy people. So yeah, they still got it because of their other skills. It's also good to make sure that people know your background and credentials. When you go to meetings, if you're in a different context, you want to say, when you do the intros, be prepared and say, well, I'm in this meeting because I've served on this committee and I've done this and I've done a white paper. So that you have the credibility, and then people will know to give you the right weight in the meeting on that. Another example is to share early when you're in meetings of your expertise. And I'll give the examples from my technical work. So I mentioned the interviews that I do. There's dozens of interviews. And at the beginning, most of the time they're new people that I'm meeting, right? Some are overlap between the two sets of interviews. And if they've seen me, we don't have to go through the intro. But when we do the intro, I give my bio. And it's like a few minutes. I go through the credibility that I have in enterprise risk management. I don't assume they know, and I'm gonna lay it down. So I'm gonna and I have to apologize to the chief risk officer in advance because they're sitting in on every one of these meetings, and it's like listening to this over and over. And I've heard myself say it hundreds of times. I'm so tired of hearing myself say it. So sometimes, and I can think of the last time this happened, it was the CEO. She only gives an hour instead of 90 minutes, which happens sometimes, and she was running 20 minutes late because she was, important meetings. And I was thinking, okay, there's limited time. I'm just going to, let's just skip the introduction. Let's just get to the work. And I always, every once in a while, I'll skip it. I always regret it because I can see that there was when you see the difference, everybody else has heard it, and they trust. If somebody doesn't know my credentials, they start resisting more, and they're a little bit more, they want to take the meeting in the way they're used to the meeting. And I'm thinking to myself, I should have done that. So what I have to do is I have to drop in the discussion, different case studies and examples and references. So after a while, they pick it up and they're like, okay, this person knows what they're talking about. Then they relax and they trust the process, and we get there anyway. We build an extra time for in just a case. So, but you can really see the difference of how it works or doesn't work if you've done it both ways. So that's really important. A second aspect that I want to share, just as an example of some of the skills, we have 11 different skills in the book on principles of persuasion, is positive imagery. Now, imagery works in sports, right? You're a football fan, right? Mm-hmm. So I hope we get to have more talks about football. But in sports, everybody knows you visualize. Like if you can visualize accomplishing a physical goal in sports, you have a chance of doing it. And they know if you cannot visualize it, you cannot do it. Business has also recognized this. There's an author, and again, I'm terrible with names, so I can't remember the name. It's the same author of the book series. It's a bestseller, Chicken Soup for the Soul. Everybody's heard of this. He also, I think he was a gold medal winner in the Olympics, athletic. I forget what he did. But he wrote another book called I think The Success Principles. And he put in there that, how business needs to use more imagery, and people are doing that. But what happens is that people that you talk to they'll do what imagery, not automatically, but they tend to do more what imagery depicts, not necessarily all the words you're using. And the difference is this, and even we do. It works on our brains too. It's just how the brain works. And I'm interested the way most technical professionals are, and that's what we focus here, is just practical. We don't go into how the brain works. No, this is just, here's the skills, this is how they work, and this is how you would apply them. This is super practical. But in this case, the brain, if you say, don't do that, don't fall. What the brain can't see the word don't. It depicts images, so it pictures falling. That aligns with your brain's connected to your body, and it can make that physical alignment trigger. And I'll give an actual example. This actually happened. I remember I was at a firm, which is the Association for Federal Enterprise Risk Management. It was a big meeting, hundreds of people in the audience, and there was a dais, and there were speakers up on the dais. There were 4 of them. Usually there's just 3. It was a little crowded. And people had their mics, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the presentation, boom, the person on the end fell over. And they fell over in a way that everybody was, the gas. They were like, this person's going to kill themselves. And they popped up just right away. And they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. I was telling myself, you're right near the edge. Don't fall, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall. I was telling myself over and over, I can't believe I fell. I personally believe that the repetition of that statement, don't fall, the fall is what the brain sees. And that repetition made it more likely that they fell. Right? It didn't directly cause it, but that's it. So using positive imagery, if you notice, watch what you project as visualization to people and to yourself, it can make an impact.
I was going to say that makes me think of one time I was driving out in Colorado on this high mountain road, and there was no railing on the side of the road, and there's this big steep cliff, and I started having this image, and I was like, I better turn around. I ended up driving back down instead of, because it can, like you're saying, your mind kind of gets a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Yeah, it can. It can influence behavior. It absolutely does. Yeah, studies show that, yeah.
Well, let's talk about, you also cover negotiation skills for technical professionals.
Yeah.
What should they know?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked it that way, because that's what I want to share is what do people really need to know in terms of technical professionals. There's a lot I can share today, but this part is key. And that's a lot in the book that I approach is we've got to get over the resistance that we have. We have to respect that that's legitimate. Technical professionals have resistance to certain skills, and this is one of them. There's 3 different aspects to this resistance. One is relevance. People often think in technical skill, well, there's a right answer to a model, to a question. There's an answer. Well, what's this negotiation? It seems like it has nothing to do with us. Well, the reality is there are always stakeholders, and you have to understand that perspective, and negotiation fits into how you describe things and how you persuade. So that's the reality. The second thing is honesty. It's an ethical thing that we like to be ethical, and the feeling from a technical professional is like, let's just skip the games. Let's just give our bottom line. So if the example is, I'll just give you an example. I mean, it's not exact, but if we're in a negotiation, we might say, we don't want to play games like I'm at 200, you're 100. I'm going to say, look, my bottom line is 150, and I might need 150. And I might have wanted 160, 170. We need this in our pricing for this product, whatever, and you wanted lower, whatever. The technical professionals, let's just go, here's my bottom line. Here's the problem. Everybody else has been trained in negotiation skills, but us. We're not using it. So we're not speaking the same language. So we may think it's super honest. Let's not pretend and act that I need something over here and then just to give you room to come back. And it's just a game. Let's just make a deal. That's not how it's interpreted. Because other people who are trained are thinking, okay, that was your opening gambit. So you gave me 150. That's how we play this game. We start, and now I'm going to negotiate. I'm a good negotiator. I'm going to move you off of the 150. I'm going to get you down to 120. What happens? What happens? We don't move. We're intransigent because we have nowhere to go. So we think it was ethical and noble and honest. It's sending the wrong signals, which is dishonest because we're not speaking by the same rules. So what we're seeing is, oh, you're uncooperative, you're intransigent, and you want everything. So that's seen as annoying. And then people won't want to deal with that person again. So the key is to play the game that everybody's playing so that you're actually speaking correctly and sending the correct signals. The third aspect that I think technical professionals resist about negotiating is humanism. You know, we're sort of kind and we kind of don't like the conflict of negotiation. We see negotiations conflict big time. And that's how it's depicted in a lot of movies or, but the reality is, this book called Power Negotiating is the way to do it, which is not confrontational. That's not as effective. It's much more effective and there's techniques for doing this, to come on the other person's side, respect and validate what they're doing, and then pivot them to your position. There's techniques for that actually, you can actually get more, and this is what I love about negotiation for technical professionals. They want the right thing. You can get more of what you need and want and still make the other side happier if you play this. That's real humanism. Why not make somebody feel good about what they have? Because and it's an interesting thing. I talk about this in the book, that the most powerful force in the universe is not the gravitational pull between planets. It is not the forces that hold atoms together. It is the need to be right. People absolutely need to be right. Even when they know they're wrong, they will fight even harder because they unconsciously feel that they're destroyed if they're wrong. We're not, but it's sort of what we feel. So you have to find a way for people to win. And we do this exercise in our classes where we have this, we just actually did it like a week or two ago, where we set up this negotiation. We teach them the gambits, we tell them the rules, we also teach them, here's the unethical gambits, never use them, here's how to defend against them, etc. And then once we train them, we say, here's an exercise. It's a little artificial because you've got 20 minutes, you've got to complete a deal or the team fails. Like we break out into two-on-two groups of 4, right? And we tell them to apply these gambits and we'll be looking in on them. And we tell them, your goal is sellers cannot sell for below a certain price, buyers cannot pay more than a certain price. We give them their secret rules ahead of time and what gambits to play. And we also tell them beyond that parameter, you have to finish in a way that the other side feels like they've won. And there's plenty of room to win because we give that range. If we set it up, you can win. Every time when we peek in on the different groups that are doing it, the competitive spirit comes up. And it's like some people are getting very pushy, and they're really like it's almost browbeating the other side. And they know they have to make a deal. They know they're going to fail. And some people are on the bridge of failing because they're trying to get too much, or they all come back. And I asked the question. You can see by the range they agreed to, the price they agreed to. I'm like, okay, tell me the truth. I said, you failed the exercise. Do you feel like you won? And you see these people going, well. I said, I can tell that there was contention there. And I explained to them, and the lesson is, look at there was almost like sometimes it gets pretty heated. And I explained to them, you have to understand that this exercise is really about getting what negotiation is about. It's not about the stuff, right? The product, the money. It's not about that. It's about winning because the competitive spirit it was about selling a car in the example we give in class. I tell them, you got really excited about this, and there is no car here. So it's clearly, and there's no money. It's not about that. It's about you wanted to win. So if you give room for other people to win, you got to come here so that you can let them move you off here so they can feel like they won. That's sort of the humanistic way to look at it. I think once you frame it this way, technical professionals really take to it much better.
Yeah, I think that comes back to that idea of knowing your audience and also this humanistic side of things that you've been talking about since the beginning about, yes, we have the data, but can we make the connection in a human way with other people? And that's how we get our ideas across, which is so important.
You're so right, because so much of this it's not about the technical. It's in the technical professional work. It's weaving in all this other stuff that is so much about people, connections, and emotions. That's the side that we haven't learned much about in our technical training. Right.
So speaking of people, I have one more question for you. Speaking of people, Let's talk a little bit about interviewing. In the book, you talk about interviewing candidates, job candidates, but also being interviewed yourself. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, just a couple of tips on that. So a lot of interviewers will say, oh, I create a hostile environment. I put pressure on because I want to see how people perform under pressure. That's not a valid way to interview. That's not successful. You're not going to get the real story from people when they're under stress. It's almost like, also with reading body language, you want people in their comfort zone so you can see a baseline and then see changes from that to read those signals. So that doesn't work. So you have to make them relaxed. And there's lots of ways you'll do it. When you go into a good interview, you'll say, you're offered a beverage. They'll give you a comfortable seat. They'll take your coat. They'll make you feel welcome. They'll chit-chat a little bit. They'll relax you. Because it's so important to see the real you. They want to know you. They got to really relax. So sophisticated interviewers will do that rather than put the lights on you and then give 5 people interviewing you at the same time. And that's not really simulating anything real. So another mistake that I think interviewers make is in letting people give theoretical answers, hypothetical answers. Like, so tell me a time when so I always ask questions that say specifically, one of the aspects of this job is this skill. Let's say it's creativity or productivity. Give me an example. So I'll say, give me an example in your past where you were particularly proud of a project you worked on. Not a hard question, right? And some people will sort of, or I say, and they'll revert into just telling you a hypothetical. I'll stop them and say, no, take a minute. I know, because it takes a minute sometimes. Just take a minute, be silent. It's okay. Think about a very specific example. When people tell you a specific past example, it is virtually impossible to lie in detail. The truth will come out because the story starts. And then all of a sudden they start telling you things that they never intended on telling you, right? So an example I have was, I remember asking the question, I said, look, you're really like off the charts academically. There's obviously what can't you do? You've succeeded in everything in your life. So tell me about a time when you had difficulty achieving a goal and then you achieved it. And they said, I did have this one thing. I said when I was in school, I had an internship. I had an internship job with the prison, and I was supposed to get the prisoner to do something like this. And I initially struggled to do it, so I agreed to smuggle something in to be able to bribe them to do it. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. And I was sort of taking notes. The truth comes out when people tell specific, exact stories. It's kind of interesting that way. So even if they drift, have the discipline to go back, say, stop, take your time. We're going to wait until you can go back and tell me a specific story that highlights the skill. Or you move on to another skill and ask them a specific past example, but only past examples. I don't want to hear any theory of how you might attack something from time management perspective, creativity, productivity. I want to always hear actual past stories. So that's from the interviewer side. From the interviewee side, one of the things that I think technical professionals forget is that people don't want to hear the answers in an interview. They don't really want to hear the answer. They want to hear how you answer. So a technical professional, they'll get a question, tell us how you think about so-and-so issue in the industry. They're like, oh, this is fantastic. I know so much about this. And they go to town. They're like, I'm going to talk for 20 minutes on this thing. They don't want to hear 20 minutes. They've got a list of questions to get through, and they want to see how you hold yourself with the answer, how you structure the answer, how you can describe it. Though they always appreciate if you can answer briefly. So I always tell people when I'm preparing people for doing interviews that what you should do is you should think for a moment. Hopefully you're prepared for all the questions already, but it's good to take a minute, take a breath, and say, okay, that's an interesting question. There's 3 main, you want to be sort of mutually exclusive, comprehensively exhaustible when you give a question. You don't want to miss something, but you don't want to give everything. So you just acknowledge that there is more to the answer. You say, well, the 3 main drivers of that thing are this. And then you give boom, 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 maybe a couple minutes, then you stop, you confidently smile, and you shut up. And what you're saying is, I think that's it's a sufficient answer. I'm happy with it. You don't say this. You're thinking it. Your face says it. And I've alluded to the fact that there is more. And I know I trust. If you want more depth, you'll ask me more, and I can go all day on this topic. That's what you're sort of saying with your face. But let them do it, because they have a checklist. I always say to the students, you got to think about, or anybody interviewing, you got to think about it from the other perspective. You always got to put yourself in the other seat. They're not necessarily your opposition, but they're on the other side, right? And think about, what do they want? And this is sort of another aspect of it, is that I think people should stay confident, because sometimes people look at a job description and say, wow, there's so much in there. And it's like, I satisfy all these things, but there's a couple of aspects of the experience that I don't have, or this that I don't have. I tell them, first of all, the hiring manager is over here, and HR helped them write it. This is sort of an idealized to attract the right people in. Nobody necessarily has all of those things all the way down the list perfectly. And by the way, if they did, they still might not be the right fit for the job for lots of other reasons. So stay positive and think about, what does the other person want? Do they want the smartest person in the world? No, not necessarily. That's not the goal. They want somebody that can do the work. Like, what are they looking for? They want somebody who can do the work, somebody that's going to take a lot of stuff off of their plate, support them so they can elevate to the higher level work they need to do, quick learning curve, get along with everybody. You don't want to have a hire and then somebody says, oh, Sim, you hired that person, what'd you do? They're arguing with everybody, terrible hire. Like, they want to be safe, they want people to get along. That's what they want, and somebody that they're going to like working with, they feel like comfortable working with. So that's what I think candidates should keep in mind. And answering with brevity, which I didn't do here, but I mean, there's more to the story here, is that you short answer and then leave room that you can answer more. That's key. Now, what do you do on the other side? People are terrified of being asked a question that they don't know. It's not a problem, unless this is absolutely in the wheelhouse of what your technical stuff is. You should know it, right? So the way to handle a question that you don't know, and by the way, another quote from one of my early mentors was, executives show strength by showing they don't have to know everything. And they got people for that. You can look things up. It's about how your mind works. It's how your heart, your motivation, your passion to contribute. That's what it is. It's not, do you know every fact, right? So how you answer that, if you don't know something, don't say, like somebody says, oh, what about this specific type of head? I don't know anything about that. You don't want to say, I don't know. No, use what you call mapping, right? You go up a higher level of abstraction until it is something you do know. So you can say, well, while I'm not familiar with that particular thing, I do know a lot about this family of investments, and then you can just describe that and say, now, from what the name sounds, I can tell it's sort of in this category, and it might have these kinds of features. So you can give a lot, and the confidence and the comfort that I don't have to know everything, but this is what I can share. So you don't have to be worried about having that question asked.
I like that idea of mapping. I'm going to have to start using that. So we do have some time for questions.
Yeah,
does anyone have a question for Sim? How about right here, sir? Is your microphone?
Thanks. Congratulations. I have a question that's maybe related, both what to do with technology. So Teams and Zoom, they're great. They bring us together. Very, very convenient, but compared to live meetings and live presentations, there's probably less attention span, there's more ability for multitasking. So how do we keep the good stuff with Teams and Zoom and those other virtual frameworks and overcome the bad stuff? And maybe related, everything is AI, and AI is going to change our world. Is AI going to change the world of communications?
So let me take the last part first, and please, chime in too. But so I thought about this in particular. This stuff is so much more important now with AI. AI is going to replace a lot of things, going to enhance a lot of things. We still need the skills of dealing with humans, right? And understanding all the things that we talked about are going to become really even more of a competitive differentiator. Knowing facts and running models, yeah, there'll be support for that, so there may be in certain areas like basic coding, or there may be less opportunities. But this stuff is going to be even more valuable, because when you're in live meetings, you can't just go use your AI, right? You got to be able to assess it in the moment, in a microsecond, and react properly, right? To keep your job and advance your ideas. So that's key. Your first question, if I could answer it at a little bit different level, because I think you're addressing an area that's important, which is I think you were talking about if you have a longer presentation, how do you maintain the energy? Is that?
Well, just I do think that Zoom is just attention spans are a bit shorter, I would say, and some people mostly it's not me.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. So what is true is that there is more challenge in Zoom, right? So I always believe in person. But we can work every way now. Post-COVID, we all are so comfortable using. If you remember, pre-COVID, people didn't want to do that, right, as much. Now it's so accepted that there's a comfort level that we all feel it's good enough to work, and we do it. What is true is that you can't read all the body language. So we talk about what body language can you see in a video, meaning what to look for. Even like shift like that, you can see my shoulders moving, so you can read it. The tricks that we talked about are looking in the camera. There's a number of things that you can do with your Zoom screen that I've seen even in meetings today that people were not doing that can make people more engaged and connected to you. Definitely is true the trick that you gave me, which is you look right under the camera, and it's not easy to do when there's different things going on. There's a number of things that we put in the book. I'll share some of them that I can think that are really important to what you're talking about. One is make sure you use a full platform, which means use your laptop, not a phone. The platform on your laptop is just, the interface is much more easy to use seamlessly without you getting distracted from the actual connection to be able to move the faces around or to see things, because you need to watch and listen really well to engage. So it all starts from understanding the listening. The other thing is, again, just today with a client, I saw this, like your head should be 50% or more of the vertical of the space. Sometimes people are so far back and we see a little head like this big. It takes away from your professionalism. You don't realize it. Sometimes it's in context of what all the other faces and all the other screens are doing and how it looks to other people. Always be front lighted, not backlit. Never use a virtual background because it's distracting motion, and any distraction will distract people from the connection with you. Even the blur, it's not perfect. It's also dangerous. Sometimes people think it works and it doesn't work, and you can see through the things you don't want to see. So without that background, there's a lot of aspects to keeping your presence there. And then there's other aspects too of how if you are speaking in a way that, again, all the things we talked about, understanding where you're talking to, speaking their language, meeting them where they are, and there's a lot more in here about how you present and how you influence. But just in sheer terms of technical, that makes a big difference in how people perceive you and managing your professional brand and your image and connecting. It's so important to connect. I don't know if you want to add anything to connecting, but there's a lot more to it that you're alluding to, which is passion. Like, you should communicate your passion for the subject. And also, again, if you're making a presentation, it shouldn't be monotonic voice is something that puts people to sleep right away. Like, you have to vary it. You have to vary your tone, your inflection. You can use silence, like I just did, right? It underlines. You can use repetition. I'll say that again. You can use repetition to make a point. So there's different things you can do to shake it up to keep people riveted. And we can talk offline more about it. But it's a very important question that you ask is, in virtual meetings, how do you stay connected? Is there any?
I think the one thing I would throw in there is that if you have slides, don't start with the slides up. Start with speaking to the people directly so they can see your face and you can see their faces. Then start your slide presentation. And then from time to time, if you're taking questions, for instance, come out of the slide share so they can see you again. So you're coming back to that, seeing each other's faces. I think that helps a lot online.
That's super important too, because a lot of people forget about it. They forget how you're being seen by those others in the video. And we've all experienced it. Somebody's leaving up the slides way too long, and we have to arrange it so we change the view so we can see more of their faces. One thing, of course, you can do is if you're a host, you can control how the screen is seen. But I think we're more in our own head, sort of just checking, oh, is my box okay? But you got to know how people are taking you. And you make a great point. So there's a lot we didn't get to about how do you actually make presentations. I talk about this in the book, that people forget your content pretty quick. They remember you. a lot longer, for positive or negative. They'll remember how you presented. Did you seem confident? Did you seem confident in your content? They may forget exactly what you said. And I make an analogy to a conference that I went to many, many years ago. I put on so many different conferences in my day. This was at a company, and we put on this conference, and it was, all these different, the general sessions and the breakouts and all the energy we put into it. And what did people remember after everything? What did people remember? The tiramisu. They remembered the dessert. They talked about it forever. So I say, you want to be the tiramisu. You want to be memorable. And the way to do that is the content changes. If you present and put time and energy into polishing how you present, and this is a really good message for technical professionals. You don't have to be phenomenal at this. You just have to be a little better than your competition. Because what's going to happen is people are going to say, I got a lot of technical people in the company. When I talk to you, I don't feel like an idiot. You talk, I understand when you talk, and you speak their language. You know what? You're going to manage that group of 20 technical people. So I don't have to talk to them anymore. That's what people are going to say, right? That's the promotions, that's the advancement, that's the opportunities. It's going to come more from, you got those as table stakes. You also know how to speak to people respectfully, simply, clearly, and effectively, and persuasively. Yes.
Hi, my name
We have a mic anywhere? Yeah. Thank you.
My name is Christelle. I'm in the Stratcom master's program. First, thank you for the discussion. My question to you is, so through our assignments and projects that we've been doing this semester, I really just realized how much I love public speaking. So what would you recommend that I can do to actually take this to the next level and get real life experience? Because I don't think practicing at home does the trick on my own.
Yeah, and I'm sure Jesse has 1,000 recommendations for you. So why don't we start with Jesse? I'll go next.
Okay, well, I'm a big fan of Toastmasters. Have people heard of Toastmasters? It's an international public speaking organization, and usually the clubs are small, 15 or 20 people. And I was in Toastmasters for 9 years. I loved it. I mean, there's a social aspect of it too, but what you do is you practice public speaking every time you show up. And I think that the real key is to keep continuously putting yourself forward for, if you're in Toastmasters, it's for taking a role in Toastmasters. But if it's in a work environment, it's okay, can you put yourself forward to give the presentation? Can you volunteer for things? Other people don't, people are worried. You're talking about the Seinfeld quote, most people aren't going to put themselves forward for a public speaking assignment, but if you do, you'll get the experience and you'll be seen more as a leader. And I think that that's a really important mindset. It's practicing taking initiative, putting yourself out there.
Absolutely agree. I just a couple of things. One is the way to get more practice. One of the things you can do is join committees, which is good for your whatever you're going to be doing in your career. What joining committees does for you, and companies love this, is two words I'm going to say that companies love. It's free training. They love free, they love that price point, and they love training. So you can practice a lot of skills, not just communication. You might actually be, and I've led a lot of organizations that I've been elected to or volunteered for. You get to practice sort of being the CEO, or you get to practice being the marketing person, so you can practice a lot of communication skills as well as presenting, because getting up and presenting. One of the things that you can do is, Toastmasters, you can even get your own clubs of people that want to get better. Videotaping yourself is really important. When you see the pain, or you feel that pain of seeing yourself use an audible pause 55 times, as I've had in the past, you all of a sudden remember it, and then it helps correct me to a degree, to maybe the best degree I can get. So those corrections, and I remember it was many years ago, when I first started at the first company I worked for, they brought in training, and that's ExecCom. It was a good company. Many like this. They did that. They had you videotaping. One of the interesting things they did was you do a presentation, you go in a separate room, watch the videotape right away. You'd be horrified, whatever. And then you come back and you'll do it a second time, let's say the next day. And what people would do is, first they would say, I look like that, I sound like that, like they just didn't really see themselves in a presentation mode. These days we see a lot more videos of ourselves, and that it wasn't like that back then. So it certainly helps when you're in presentation style. What also happened was at the end of the presentation, the trainer would come up to the room and they would start to get feedback. And the person would say, oh, I did this. And the trainer would say, you be quiet, because it doesn't matter what you think. You're the only person in the room that the opinion doesn't matter. It's everybody else. Their collective perspective of what actually just happened is the only feedback that matters. And they say this on like singing competition shows too. It's like, oh, I made a mistake. Famous singers will guide them. Don't tell anybody, because they maybe didn't know. Or a dancer, they didn't know every choreographed move. So don't beat yourself up and don't project that you made that mistake. Just feel confident and do the show. That's what people want to see. So getting the feedback from where it matters, not yourself. So you may be self-conscious about this or that. The audience may not even read it. And with practice and feedback, you'll see that. So yeah, a lot of work on committees can really help brush up a lot of things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jade Nieves Calderon here. In relation to the ERM program, I was wondering, how would you recommend professionals who are communicating about risk / like negative news in a way that doesn't, create fear?
In a way that doesn't?
Create fear. Like, how can you communicate, risk or negative news without creating fear amongst employees or even customers?
Yeah, so that's a question more that crosses over both of our professions, like how do you deliver certain messaging? It's an important question. I don't think I can answer from a certain perspective without going through lots of different scenarios, right? There's, an environment, like there could be, are you in a closed meeting? Is it we're crafting communication for the public? There's lots of different aspects to it. I will say when you're communicating to, say, the boards in general, the boards need to know, right, things. So what you will find leaders want to know is they want to know things soon, right? Like the saying is, bad news that's delivered quickly is the only kind of bad news that should come. Nobody should be hiding anything, right? So you got to get that. So one aspect for our profession is that chief, and this is a governance issue, chief risk officers should have access to the board. They shouldn't be, oh no, you're going to meet once a year and we're going to be supervised. No, you have to have ad hoc access for things like that. So that's sort of, there's so many different dimensions to the question that you asked. So are you, so governance structure, but in terms of crafting it, we'd have to go through different aspects. And we can talk offline. It's like who is the person, what is the message, who is it, and there's different structures for it, but always ethical, honest, immediate for things, and in the pathways that governance has set up for processes.
I think you could also mention, if you're going to discuss potential solutions or potential paths forward, you say that at the beginning of the presentation, like, I'm going to cover the real numbers and also some potential solutions for our situation, so that your audience knows that there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you for the question. Yes, over here. We have the mic coming.
Yes, so for me, I think one of the struggles sometimes is if you are presenting to people, executives or people in higher positions, there is a tendency for meetings to go on different tangents, and as a junior, on different tangents.
Tangents, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's as a junior person in the meeting, it's hard for you to bring them back to the topic because they're all very high senior executives. And risk profession, we are one of those that we have a lot of material that we want to quickly go through, and it's hard to bring them back. So what are some of the suggestions to control that kind of meeting when you are on a lower level with the higher executives?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. There's a lot of ways to approach that. One way is, and it's right in what you said, right? It's that we talk a lot about this, looking at the other perspective and respecting the perspective. So it may seem like a tangent to us because we want to get through our stuff. It doesn't seem like a tangent to that person. And so we need to respect, if it is a pure just non sequitur, that's a different story. Then it's more the power structure in the room. It's difficult to navigate that. But in terms of if something happens, and I'll relate it, if you let me, to a similar analogy, not exactly the same, a similar analogy to what I advise when doing the technical work that I do in terms of communication skills. When we are talking to people about, in enterprise risk management, the first set of interviews is to just sort of blue sky. What are the risks to our strategic plan? All the things we plan to do, our baseline, that could go different ways from any area. It's open to anything. And we have a way of structuring, understanding the source of the risk, sorting it out the level, and scoring them and figuring it out. Then once we figure out what we think the biggest top, say 20, 25 risks are, we do a deeper dive with subject matter experts on each of those risks. So we're coming to the table for that next conversation, and it starts out with the 90 minutes using, I won't get into too much detail, we're doing an in-depth of looking at multiple scenarios of how that risk could play out. Sometimes in those meetings, I give guidance of how you actually walk people through so you can get to the originating source of that risk, and sometimes there may be more than one, and you have to split it up. So you get each one at a time. Talk through all the different ways that could work through the company, how competitors, how stakeholders would react, to get the entire understanding on a multi-year cash flow basis to understand the impact of the value of the company. That's a holistic approach. So we have an agenda, and we have a tight time frame. One of the tactics, and we talk about different tactics of getting this information, is somebody may bring up something you think is extraneous. And this happens, and I train the students to do this too. I always come with like a very large notebook. In fact, I don't like legal side generally, but I use it like a legal side, like a big notebook. Why? Because when people start, especially when they start out, I just take everything down respectfully. And because even if I think, okay, this is not relevant, you never know. Right? It may not be relevant for what I want to accomplish here at this micro moment. I also have the job of trying to find all the other risks that the company may have. So sometimes somebody may offer something that seems like a tangent, but actually to what I want to accomplish, but actually may lead to uncovering a new risk. So keep the ears open, keep the writing going. You can always separate it later. You might find don't shut down the conversations. Another aspect of this is, from my technical profession, just as an example, is that when we're going through a company and we're going through the first set of interviews, so we ask each person, what do you think the risks are? There's a lot of overlap, right? Because many of them are executives in the same meetings, and they know certain risks that they face. I mean, everybody faces economic risk, competitor risk, supplier risk, different kinds. We know that, right? So they have their specific ones. When we've gone through sometimes 36 of these interviews, and we're hearing the 20th time a certain risk is repeated, there's a tendency to want to think, I want to get the stuff I haven't heard yet to make it. So I might want to say, well, we already know this one. I always say, I got to keep my mouth shut, because they may keep your eyes open, keep your mind open, because they may describe it in a way that is nuanced, and there may be some new aspect that nobody else brought up, and that happens, and then we incorporate it. It takes sort of control of our emotions and our near-term moment. And politically, it's very important also to keep the respect and keep an open mind of what that tangent might be. I'll give you one more story. It's not exactly related to this, but it just comes to my mind of what you're talking about when somebody goes in a different direction. And this was a client I had, and they were really amazing. I mean, the head of ERM was, everything you want in the person in that role. They're just phenomenal at it. And their company now is using the methodology to do strategic planning, run the company. The board loves it, everything. When we implemented it, and we were showing the results, and we were showing the results to the board of what risks were above the line that we thought needed a deeper dive and we should manage and quantify more fully, and what were below the line, which we would just monitor for the future with what we call KRIs, or key risk indicators. Just keep an eye on it over time. If they become more important, then we do a deeper dive on those. And these days, certain cyber risks for some companies will fall above the line or below the line for different reasons. So one of the board members asked a question, and you may think it was going to take the conversation in the wrong way, and that's sort of the initial interpretation of the chief risk officer. They said, well, why is this risk not above the line? It was a certain cyber risk, and that tends to be the focus, is like all cyber risks should be above, they shouldn't. And the chief risk officer gave the perfect technical answer to what the board member asked. But watching the body language, what happened to that board member shifted back and went like that. And I saw this, the chief risk officer was satisfied with the question, it was technically correct. I knew this could derail the project because there wasn't the respect given to that perspective. So I took the opportunity to interject and say the following. I said, I'm glad you brought that up. I said, as a consultant, I can tell you doing this for lots of other companies, and I gave more of an answer that there are certain reasons why a certain risk will be above or below the line. It's about your vendor and your brand and the market and different. And I went through some of those explanations. I also said, and this input is really valuable to us because it's part of the process. All risks, we want to get the collective conscious understanding and quantitative understanding, expression of rate, ranking and likelihood as well, to understand how it plays into the whole risk-reward profile of the company. And it's always evolving, and we always want all the assumptions that we have. We actually do vet it vertically and horizontally in the company because we want all peripheral voices that could come from down in the organization and especially from the top of the organization. We want your input. I said, this is part of our process and we would love to have a meeting with you afterwards to get your input because we may have missed something. So and what happened was the board member, the arms came across, open, and they leaned forward. Because we were listening to that sort of tangent, right, and respected it, and had humility and an open mind of maybe there is something here we need. There's certainly no downsides to the conversation, and it was part of a healthy process of inclusion. So it's a great sort of example, because you raise an important question. There's so many different aspects to it. That it's another example of there's technical that we know, and there's a lot of emotional communication stuff that we don't know. And again, we don't have to be perfect at it. We just have to, I want people that read this book to take whatever pieces they feel like grab onto. And I feel there's a lot that's accessible to technical professionals. Start playing with it in your personal life, in your business life, and then build on it. Even sometimes one skill played the right way one time can change the trajectory of your career. And the people to the left of you and the right of you in your company, if they're not paying more attention, especially living through AI, this is going to be the differentiator even more so. So thank you for that question.
I think we have time for one or two more. So in the back there.
Hi, thanks for sharing your knowledge and time with us. I wanted to ask, I'm an online coach. I sell my services through Zooms. You were mentioning that how to handle our Zooms, right? The first thing that I do in my video calls is, because I stutter when I talk, and the first thing that I tell my clients is that I stutter, so that to break the ice and to let them know that I'm not nervous or I don't believe on what I'm saying. The thing is that I just have that thing, right? So I wanted to ask you, what do you think about that way to start the conversation or to break the ice? And also I wanted to ask you some tips of how to open the video calls in terms of like how to start them to create the good feeling with the client or with the person that you're talking to.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah. I'll let you comment on some of that, but I mean most of that. But I want to just address a couple things. One thing is I'm a firm believer in. I never argue with success. So we all may have a slightly different way of doing a certain thing. If it works for us and it's working, stay with it. So if you find that's working for you, that's fantastic. I want to address something that you mentioned that is really important and I think intelligent that you're doing, which is you're thinking about how others see you and their level of comfort. Most technical professionals do not think like that, right? And you're an athlete too, right? So yeah, I know. So this is, it's a lot, there's a lot to this. And more technical professionals think about how we're perceived. I was just mentioning this the other day in a meeting that many years ago, this is sort of the tangent, my apologies, that when I was working in my life, part of my job, I was in the corporate department, and part of my job was to sort of brush up the actuaries in the company. I was going to try to give them training, right? And so my goal was, and it's maybe an ambitious goal, was I wanted all the actuaries in the company to be mistaken for non-actuaries, right? So they were super technical people, and I wanted people that meet them to not see a gap in communication skills, in human skills, right? So that was it. So I started to think about what are all the holes in the technical training that they got, and I started thinking about this many years ago. And so I created this program that we started to implement parts of it. I called it Executive Training for Actuaries, EXTRA program, right? And part of it was thinking about others in the company. Because every technical profession, there's so much that we do with our own stuff. We're in our own bubble, we're in our own world, and we tend to put almost maybe too much weight on that. So I wanted them to understand you're just one function in a big organization that only functions if all the other people are working together, right? So you have to understand. So I wanted to train them in all the different major functions of an insurance company and understand how they relate and the perspectives of the others. And so what you're doing is thinking about, are they comfortable? How do they look at things? What are their goals? What are their biases? And also something called executive perspective, because a lot of us we're in our own lane here, but an organization wants us to really own and think about the entire organization. And sometimes we may do things that maybe don't exactly achieve our goals right here, but they achieve larger goals for the organization. That sacrifice is good and aligned with, so thinking from the top down of what are all these things, what I'm doing is connecting to everybody, and am I doing things that don't connect, that I should do different things and check that, or am I not doing things I should be doing? But it's all connected to the same concept. We got to get outside of our bubble, which may be uncomfortable, but the step you've taken is the right one. You're thinking, I need to make this other person comfortable. If they're not comfortable, they don't want to deal with me. I mean, that's everything you do. So I have my boutique consulting firm, right? So everything I've done for the firm is to make myself easy to work with, easy to understand and attract clients to work with. That's part of it. Do I have the goods? I believe I have the technical goods. I also have to do all the other stuff. How do they perceive the company? How do they want to deal with me? How do they want to do this? How do they want to do that? A lot of things you have to think about. But you're doing that journey. You're thinking about, now, different ways. You mentioned another aspect, which is starting the Zoom. So I maybe would pass that to you if you want to take that one, the how do you start a Zoom meeting in a way that puts everybody at ease. I mean, you could have 75 different types of Zooms. I mean, right, there's different types of meetings. So it's hard to answer the question, but I know you have tricks and techniques.
Well, I don't tricks and techniques. I mean, I think that, well, as I was mentioning earlier, starting not with your slides up, but with your face, and then actually making, if you can, just a little bit of small talk at the beginning. Like sometimes it's even just like greeting the people, like, hey, Sim, hey, hey, Christelle, hey, whoever's on the meeting, just saying their names so that you're acknowledging that they're there. I think that helps break the ice quite a bit. And the only thing that I'll add to what Sim was saying too was that what you described is what's called self-disclosure. It's something that we study in the communication field. It's like when you reveal something about yourself, and it's an important way to build trust. So I think if it's working for you, then it makes sense to keep doing it.
The friendliness aspect is important. So and it's about what you've said, about how you're perceived. We may feel really positively towards people in a meeting, and if we're in our head, though, about something else, and we're worried about something that's going to happen in 2 hours from now, and we're not present, we might have an expression on our face that we don't even realize. We may be emoting something that's picked up and read the wrong way. It sends the wrong signals and can put people off. So being conscious that when you greet people, to be expressive, have your expression match your joy in meeting them, and say, oh, hi. Just wave. I like to wave. I like to wave at the beginning of a Zoom meeting. It's very friendly, almost like childlike. It's like, hey. So it is important to start that way. I think that's a great answer you gave.
Yeah, so it's 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
I think we have to leave it there.
Yeah.
But Sim, it was such a pleasure. I really enjoyed reading the book. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I enjoyed this conversation, definitely.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for doing this.